next session, which is, it's not precision medicine, it's going to come up in a little while. It's AI for science, minds, and machines. And I would like to welcome Mr. Petros Koumoutsakos, Professor of Computing in Engineering and Sciences from Harvard University. And he's going to be interviewed by my dear colleague, Thanasis Katsikidis.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for this very kind invitation. It's a hard act to follow after Professor or Dr. Julia. So I'd like to talk about AI for science. I would like to talk about how AI for science involves minds and machines. So maybe a few words or a few ideas about what is science. And of course, when you want to know about science, you don't go to France, but you go to Greece. You go to 2,500 years ago, and you think about Plato and Aristotle, and you think about the ways that they thought about knowledge. And one of the particular things that I like, or many of the things I like about Plato, there is one which actually I think it's at the core of machine learning. It's the allegory of the cave. And the idea is that what you're looking at the world, you don't see the real world, but you see shadows. You see the latent space, if you like, for those who do machine learning. And then you try to interpret what it is that you see. And then, of course, people disagree. One of them calls it a dog, another an animal, a pet. And then one day, one of us is released from the chains, goes out, sees that it's a three-dimensional world, and it's blue and it has colors, goes back, tells the other, and a fight erupts because these are Greek people after all. So what is science? I would say it's the pursuit of knowledge. So we have been pursuing knowledge with amazing machines. We have been building experimental things like the one that you see here. And we have been pursuing science through the thinking that we have been doing. And here's a few of the people, or the giants of the field, that they have been thinking about science and about how to go about science. And I would like to mention one person in particular, which unfortunately is not Greek, but is German. This is Leibniz, who was the first to think that if controversies were ever to arise, even between philosophers, they should be able to resolve them the way two accountants are having a quantitative information and resolving a dispute. So he was, in a sense, the pioneer of computing because he mentioned the word calculemus. So computing, as we know today, maybe can be traced to Oppenheimer and von Neumann that you see here. And of course, the beginning of computing was quite dramatic and troublesome.
There it goes. The fourth atomic bomb has been successfully detonated.
So in days that we are thinking about the ethics of AI, we should also be thinking about the origins and the ethics that are associated with computing overall. Computing also is not something that we thought.
Good evening. I'm David Wayne, and as all of you are, I'm concerned with the world in which we're going to live tomorrow. A world in which a new machine, the digital computer, may be of even greater importance than the atomic bomb.
This is 1961. It's even before I was born, but people were thinking about computing over the last 60 years. Now, coming back to me, I had the privilege of accessing some of the biggest and best computers in the world. Started from 1981 back at the National Technical University of Athens and competing in various supercomputing contests. And what I would like to say, I think there is probably no other technology that has magnified itself by a factor of 1 trillion. Imagine that you are able to see 1 meter with a certain device that you have, or with your eyes, and then imagine that you can see 1 trillion meters further away. This is an amazing technology, computers that have facilitated a lot of things. So what I have been doing is I have seen computing as a way of doing studies that go across disciplines. So these are different simulations that they are from my lab, and some of these simulations, they involve biology, molecular mechanics, cancer. One would say you're doing too many things or so many different things. I actually do one thing, and that is computing, which is basically you go and you abstract from the problem, the computational elements, and many of the computational elements, they translate across different disciplines. Two things to observe here the bottom line is a microfluidic device that is for the separation of circulating tumor cells. The other one up there is the cavitation. Both of them are two of the biggest simulations ever made in fluid mechanics. They involved 1 trillion computational elements. So we have been studying things for nanotechnology. We have been studying things in microfluidics also. Scales is an important thing. And we have been studying other things like these types of explosions. I would like to show you, though, the limitations that the study of science through simulation has. This is the wing of an airplane, and what you see here is structures that are observed by putting oil on the wing of the airplane and driving it through a wind tunnel. So if your eyes can be guided by this yellow arrow, you see a little speck, which is about the size of a nail, and if I blow this thing up, you will see these beautiful structures. These are vortices that are at the near wall region of an airplane. This beautiful structure is the structure of turbulence, one of the biggest and most challenging problems. But at the same time that you see all this structure, you have to appreciate that we are only able to know exactly what happens on the window of an airplane only at the size of my nail. And we have no way ever by computers, unless maybe quantum computers come, that will be able to resolve the truth and find out the truth about the flow around an airplane by doing this. So there's limits in forecasting, and in particular when you go up in scales and in problems like climate, you're interested in wildfires, you're interested in big-time turbulence, there's huge amounts of scales, there's chaotic dynamics, these are expensive, and then also you try to understand and to predict, and then the classical ways that we are studying fundamental science have been problematic. So how do people design airplanes? Well, they use some simulations, but they also use heuristics. They use turbulence models. And then these turbulence models, they involve a lot of intuition, a lot of understanding of how humans understand fundamental principles, and then they take them and they exploit them to other domains and to bigger systems. And the new thing, what I believe AI brings us the capabilities of computers to automate heuristics, to make them faster, better, data-driven, and I think it's a great revolution for science, AI, because it's able to replace all sorts of human factors and empiricism with a systematic way of trying to extrapolate to things that scientific discovery alone cannot do. So now we all talk about AI, we all have our definitions. I'd like to talk about two things. The first one is AI, and then there is a perspective that AI is about thinking machines.
Can machines really think? Even the scientists argue that.
I don't believe that we can say yet that machines do think. I have a basic question which I always ask, and that is, are these producing anything really new? Until I see a machine producing genuinely new things, I will not agree that machines think.
I confidently expect that within a matter of 10 or 15 years, something will emerge from the laboratories which is not too far from the robot of science fiction fame.
This is the Claude Shannon of the Claude Shannon information theory. And again, this is from the same thing back in 1961. So people have been thinking how artificial intelligence can replace humans, and one of the places where human intelligence is considered to have an expertise is mathematics. So I participated in a panel of the National Academies where we discussed whether artificial intelligence is ever able to replace mathematical reasoning, but I think at the moment we think that it can assist mathematical reasoning and at the same time assist mathematical thinking overall. Another view of artificial intelligence is whether artificial intelligence is a problem, or in the end, what are the problems that society has today? And I think it's not that AI is the only thing that we have to be concerned, but I believe the things that we have to be concerned is energy, there is poverty, there is water, there is the concept of complexity that is manifested in different social and financial sectors. And one thing that perhaps AI can help us is whether can machines solve for X, and not necessarily this egocentric way, whether machines can think the way we do. So one way to define AI in this sense is coming from John McCarthy, who says that the AI is the computational part of the ability to achieve goals in the real world. It's not about understanding, but it's about predicting, and it's about arriving to goals, and it's about doing things in the real world. So people who use AI to try to do things in the real world, they're trying to do things like forecasting the weather. I'm spending my sabbatical at DeepMind, and I have the privilege to sit around some extraordinary individuals who have taught me a lot about how AI can be used for weather forecasting. But one of the things that I never realized when I first read this paper, and I now understand, is that the data that are being used to do the forecasting using AI, they depend on simulations that they have been done on first principles that people have used. So this is a very nice marriage between the classical science and the modern science, and trying to see whether, in a sense, machine learning understands latent dynamics that we cannot necessarily find inside the first principle simulations that we do. And there is, of course, other great things happening. There's people who think about AI to do things like what this paper does here, thinking about farms and how can you apply AI to test all sorts of different things. And again, whatever we do at the moment is involving heuristics, the same way that we use heuristics to design airplanes and cars and ships. We are also using a lot of heuristics to decide when do we plant something, how do we plant it, what else do we plant around there, how can we monitor the environment, and I think AI brings new ideas that can be of extreme help in these domains. So I'd like to tell you, since we're talking about AI for science, how I have been using AI for doing scientific computing. As you have seen, I have spent a big part of my career by doing simulations based on first principles, but also starting about 25, 30 years ago as a postdoc at Stanford, I started doing artificial intelligence as well, except that, as I said, computers were 1 billion times slower at the time. So now we are interested in using again AI and to combine it with the art of simulations. So one of the things that I'm doing, you have heard a lot of things about generative AI. So I'd like to tell you just a few ideas of how to use generative AI to learn the effective dynamics, the shadows of Plato, that are the ones that are able to predict different systems. So the first part is that you can consider these diffusion models for images. You consider every image to be a sample of a probability distribution. So what you do is you try to invert this process, and you try from one image to discover the probability distribution, and then you sample this probability distribution, and then because it is a probability distribution, you're going to get different images. Now, another thing that you can do is, of course, you can do it for an image, but now you can also do it for videos. You can look at videos, and the same thing that you see an image being part of a probability distribution, a video, any favorite movie that you have is just a sample of a probability distribution, and can we find the probability distribution from where these videos are coming from, because then we can produce a lot of different movies. So the third idea that I'm not talking about here is that we can combine what artificial intelligence does for producing the probability distributions of movies with guidance coming from physics. So what we are doing is we are doing guided diffusion, but also for sequences of images. So this guided diffusion is actually what has given, what I believe is one of the greatest simulations that they involve turbulent channel flows, and the state of the art in this field is doing it in a fast way, not by resolving every scale, but by doing it with something called large eddy simulations. And then after training, I have to remind you of that, generative learning of effective dynamics outperforms this by a factor, by 2 orders of magnitude. And again, I know you're thinking about the big picture, but for me, it's important to realize that when you can use AI, you can actually go down and figure out details of a simulation, like the fluctuations of the domain, a fluctuation of the velocity field. And for the first time, I see that AI is not only able to capture average quantities, but it's also able to capture extremes and statistics of fluctuations. The last thing that I want to tell you about, which is my work, it involves multi-agent deep reinforcement learning, and I'd like to spend a little bit more time here, because by working in this field, I learned a lot of different things that perhaps they carry to other parts of the discussion that is happening here. So what is reinforcement learning? First of all, the inspiration from this was by reading books to my children. And there is this beautiful book called Flotsam, and in Flotsam it talks about how you can have machines and animals that are working together. It's an old book, and it's a beautiful visually and thinking book. So you can consider animals or us or everything in the world as a kind of an agent. So you can consider, for example, two fish here to be agents that are swimming together. And you have to ask the question, why are they swimming together and what are they trying to do? So the way we try to answer this question is through reinforcement learning. So what is reinforcement learning? Is behavioral changes that you have due to experiences. So forget all the math and think about yourself. How did your childhood affect what you do now? This is some kind of reinforcement learning. If you smell some food that reminds you of your grandmother or your mother, this is some kind of type of reinforcement learning. So there is a stimulus, there is an action, and there is some kind of a reward. And the idea is that if there is a certain stimulus action pattern that is rewarded, the actor is conditioned to a behavior. So the nice thing about reinforcement learning and a nice thing about AI in general is that these concepts here, they don't apply only to computer science, telecommunication networks, energy networks, and fish swimming, as I will show you. They apply also to psychology and other fields. Now, one of the pioneers of reinforcement learning was at Harvard, and it was Burrus Skinner. I don't know how many of you know Burrus Skinner, but Burrus Skinner was doing games or playing things with pigeons.
The two pigeons are at either end of a small ping pong table. One pigeon pecks the ball as it comes toward him and knocks it toward the other pigeon. Other pigeon pecks the ball back across the table. If it goes past one pigeon, the other pigeon can eat, and if it goes the other way, the other pigeon eats. So that there is it's a real game.
So the story here is that the two pigeons, as soon as they score, the door opens and then they can get some food. So they condition themselves, not to the particular physics of the ball, but every time the ball crosses, they get to eat. So they simplify the whole thing and they use this idea, which again is the origin of reinforcement learning. Can you imagine why Burrus Skinner was interested in pigeons? Nobody knows about this in this room? So I'll give you a tip. This is the 1950s. Can you imagine why Burrus Skinner was funded by DARPA to do pigeons? So pigeons could be pilots of missiles. So the idea is that you're training the pigeons when they see a particular image, then they will have to peck and they will get food. So then you put the pigeon inside the missile, you send it somewhere, and you see that when the pigeon will see something outside, will peck on that, and that was the ballistic missiles of the time, and there's Burrus Skinner down there, and you can read all about that at the MIT Technology Review, which actually brings a very nice closure to this event. Now, what is reinforcement learning is, again, when you do the bicycling, you don't study turbulence, you don't know anything, but you know that if you do something with your balance, you will stay up, and then you will have some reward, which is that you travel to your destination. And when you put all these things in mathematical models, you put a deep neural net, and that's the thing that relates the states of the environment and the real world and the actions that you take. So there have been amazing applications for reinforcement learning. People use reinforcement learning to play the game of Go. People are using it for fusion, which is another thing. For me, the moment that I realized that reinforcement learning can be really powerful is when I studied two fish. And then you have a fish that is down there, and it's a free swimmer. And then there is another fish that is up there. and wants to swim better than the fish that you see down there. And it has any degrees of freedom, but it has some information that there is another thing swimming in the domain. So when we play the movie, what this thing will do is it will try to maximize its efficiency. So it's interesting what it does. It realizes that there is some kind of disturbances in the flow. These are vortices. And without any guidance by a human or anybody else, it dives into the wake of the vortices because there is energy there. And if it's able to adapt its body in the right way, then it's able to harness energy from the vortices and propel itself without doing extra energy as the guy in front does. So maybe ideas like that exist in the peloton, a French invention in bicycling, but you can apply this, of course, to fish swimming. You can apply this to 3 dimensions. It is important that now they don't swim exactly behind, but on the side, because that's where the energy is. You can expand this to multiple swimmers. These are all heroic simulations together with reinforcement learning to extract energy from the wakes. Perhaps the more spectacular is this one, where the wake is a complete mess, but by putting this guy in the right way and swimming in the right frequency, it's able to extract energy from both of the other fish. And we take it a bit further. These are 300 fish. Of course, this is a very important number for Greeks, especially from people from Sparta, like myself. So these are 300 fish that are swimming together, and they're trying to coordinate. We have not succeeded to apply multi-agent reinforcement learning to 300 fish, but I thought that since there is a big screen here, I would like to see this video anyway. So now extensions of this thing are many. Of course, there are people who are interested in underwater robot swarms in the ocean. If you are interested for them to last for a long time, you better take care of hydrodynamics. There is other things. There is a lot of wind turbines that exist also in Greece. And here is a simulation of wind turbines over here, where you see the first wind turbine is getting some good efficiency, but the ones that are right behind it, they don't get good efficiencies. So there is a lot of space to use these ideas of how can I harness hydrodynamics to improve my efficiency. Last 5 minutes, I hope I'll use less than that, to talk about the future. So the future is going to look good, and it's going to look like that. We're going to go back to wearing nice clothes, and we're going to be using computers. I think there's 2 things from this image that I would like to stress. One is that there is a group of people here that are doing things together. I don't believe that there is a hero of artificial intelligence that will come and save everything and solve everything. So I think we should continue to talk to each other, humans, in a human way, and to communicate and to go to cafes and play backgammon and drink ouzo. But at the same time, we should learn how to use computers, because computers are important and are the things that can augment, as Luke Julia said, augment our intelligence. I'd like to think also that what you see that we try to do to animals, perhaps we can see this thing happening in artificial general intelligence, where you have robots and humans working together. And artificial superintelligence will imply that we will not be there, we'll be out somewhere doing something else, and they will take care of everything we care about. I mean, that's another way of thinking. But I think, as you saw in my work, I'm able to study diverse physical systems, and I'm not the only one. A lot of scientists are able to think about blood flows and collective swimming by understanding fundamentals and by going and understanding and exploiting interfaces between the different fundamentals. So I think this is something that remains human for the moment. Maybe AI can help. And I'm very happy to hear the discussion that preceded us, because I have been working also for 30 years in AI, and I have seen that one of the biggest challenges of AI is hype. there is tremendous hype and there is tremendous overstatement of what people do. People do something that is related to 1 + 1 = 2, and because they use a computer, they call it maybe AI. And I think this is a very important challenge. This is from a report that I encourage everybody to read. It's from the Association for the Advancement of AI, and in there, this is one of the challenges that they observe. Further to the future, thinking about young people, I think there are things that will stay human. It's retrospection, is imagining, is empathy, is understanding, and I don't know how you translate this to computer code these days. Teaching a course at Harvard next year, which is called AI, Computing and Thinking. It's a course for the general education program at Harvard, where lawyers, philosophers, social scientists, not necessarily physical people who study the physical sciences take. And I think it's important to keep this last part, the part about thinking. Thank you very much. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Professor. It's our great honor and privilege having you here. So it's a little bit an anniversary that I would like to highlight that in 1949, Alan Turing, the great mathematician and philosopher, developed the imitation game known today as the Turing test. In this simple test, there are 3 players, the interrogator, the human, and the machine, of course. And the interrogator has no contact with the questions, neither with the written responses. So this test tries to prove whether a computer is capable of thinking like a human or not. So what is so significant in this test is that Alan Turing, 7 decades ago, posed a question: can machines think? So this question is one that I showed earlier at your presentation, and I would like to begin with a question about how do you envision the future and how do you envision the transition from the advanced AI to superintelligence?
So how do I envision the future? It's a very difficult thing to always predict the future, right? I think some other famous person said that. So the way I see at the moment what's happening is that AI brings us a lot of information that augments what we can do. So if I want to write a paper, I'm not a native English speaker, I can give it to an AI agent that is together with my LaTeX or my Word document, and it can correct my English. I find this fantastic because I can spend most of my time thinking about other things than what is the correct pronunciation of this or what is the correct spelling. So thinking that you will have agents that they will be capable of having capabilities across the board, this is the AGI, that are better than humans. I think for certain tasks I can see this happening, but again, for all these other things like feelings and so on, when the feelings count, when the empathy counts, when the imagination counts, I don't see how AGI will achieve that. And at the same time, this ASI, yes, there will be days that there will be tasks that machines can do way better than any of us will ever be able to do. But yeah.
There is a growing debate about the EU's position in the US-China competition on artificial intelligence. Do you think that the EU is lagging behind in AI software development due to a lack of expertise, probably a lack of personnel, or are other factors that are we so behind?
Behind or forward, that's something that you need metrics to define who's better than whom, in what, and why. I spent 23 years as a professor at ETH in Switzerland. I'm 5 years now at Harvard. What I see is that Europeans are not so good at marketing or advertising the work that they do. Americans are superb about doing that. And the nice thing about being superb in advertising and promoting your work is that you attract funding, you attract people who have a vision and we have ideas. So I don't see it that we are behind or forward or whatever. I think Europe has certain talents and I think we can learn from each other. I think the Americans, they can take from Europe a little bit the depth of interrogation of different subjects, and we can take from the Americans the idea of let's be adventurous, let's imagine, let's go forward, let's do it, instead of just thinking too much.
Also, I would like to highlight that you are the president of the Hellenic Institute of Advanced Studies. So 2 years ago, you stated in an interview that Greece has the capabilities of building a university better than Harvard. Could you please elaborate more about this?
Thank you for the question. The Hellenic Institute of Advanced Studies is a collection of people from the diaspora, and what we'd like to do is to create bridges between scientists of the diaspora and our colleagues in Greece. And the idea is to try to solve problems not only for Greece, but also problems for the whole world, if you like. And I think if you look at these 150, 170 members that we have, if you take a random sample of 50 of these people, you will get one of the best universities of the world and necessarily competing with Harvard. And I would like to say that we don't only do AI at HIAS, but we are thinking of things like sustainability, we're thinking about earthquakes. There is a tremendous amount of knowledge in the Hellenic diaspora, in the French diaspora, the German diaspora, and maybe this opportunity also for Europe at this moment to think not only for a Hellenic Institute of Advanced Study, but like a European Institute of Advanced Study. If I may say, the inspiration for this place has been what happened to the US, where Oppenheimer built the Institute of Advanced Study after the Second World War, and the Weizmann Institute in Israel, which is an amazing institution that brings the Israelis together with the diaspora to do great science.
Wow, that's amazing. Due to lack of time, I have a question that we, the journalists, not love to ask, but unfortunately we have to ask. We see all the people, young students like Andrianos, like other high school students that deserves to leave Greece, go outside, abroad and study. So we usually discuss about brain drain. What about brain gain? What do we need to build institutes, centers, research facilities to create the Harvard that we spoke before?
I think it's very simple. You need to create a physical location. You need to give incentives to people to come and spend time at this location. You need about 10 million for 6 years, if I may give you even numbers, and you need political will to do this and to start. And I think you will attract people, and you will actually have people, not only the Greek young students staying in Greece, but you may even attract people from all over the world to Greece because it's a beautiful place. I've never been to a more beautiful conference site than this one. People have passion, people have great food, people have sun. I think it's a great opportunity to lead, not only always to be followers and look at the Americans and look at the Germans and all that. We can lead.
So let's hope for the best. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Petros Koumoutsakos, thank you so much.
Yeah.